we're not just talking about transgenerational influences either. For a lot of us, we're also talking about similar energetics that come from our past life records, assuming you believe you have a worldview that takes that in, but also from all of us of being part of what is now 4,000 years of patriarchal culture, where the sacred feminine has been so denigrated, dishonoured, persecuted. And whatever, whether male or female, all of us carry to a certain extent a degree of rage around all that, which is not strictly speaking personal to us, but which we must work with to be able to clear. Whether, it's the Lilith Medusa-like rage towards the masculine, or whether it's the wounded masculine raging towards the feminine that appears so overpowering and devouring. In either respect, this is territory that we must work with, because these constitute our greatest blockages to real intimacy on every level. And obviously in terms of anything that offers to open our hearts. Now, coming back to this Jupiter-Juno conjunction, even in the mythology of these two, there are various dramas. It is not an easy relationship at times, at least as seen from the Greco-Roman origins of the Jupiter-Juno myth. Because in those versions of their myth, Jupiter is like this randy adolescent who's having sex with various human and non-human beings and is constantly trying to escape his wife, who in her enraged form takes out her vengeance on his demigod children. So it's a rocky kind of relationship, at least seen through that lens. And yet they're inseparable. They are incomplete without each other. But we're not talking about codependency here. We're talking about two powerful entities who are intimately bonded. And so this coming together is like a reunification of this profoundly gracious bond. But if you understand Jupiter energy, and Juno is definitely a feminine version of Jupiter energy, a form of grace, expansion, growth, often expansion will highlight what's in the way of it. And the Jupiterian or Juno energy actually pushes for the flushing up of what's in the way. So there's tremendous form of help there. And in some ways, even though I see them in terms of being mid-level, in terms of power or Shakti, if you like, they do mirror the Shiva-Shakti relationship to a certain extent. And this is where we can draw from not just the mythology of Hindu culture, but also the spiritual practices of it. The goddess of the sacred marriage in Hinduism is Parvati, who is both she's a yogic queen in many ways, and she is one of the consorts. She is a primary consort of the great Shiva. And what is interesting about Hindu pantheon is that Parvati is related to Kali, is related to the goddess of sacred sexuality, the very beautiful Lalita, and in some ways they're one goddess with different faces. This is why you'll see various myths where Shiva has different consorts, but each of those consorts is in a different flavour of the goddess, that are all interrelated. And in a similar way to Jupiter and Juno, Shiva cannot act in the world without Shakti. In one of his primary myths, his first wife, Sati, dies in tragic circumstances. And Shiva is so traumatized by the loss of his beloved first wife that he does his thing and he goes off into the Himalayas for a few million years and goes into deep meditation. And this, you can hear the echoes then, can't you, in terms of how that can also be an escapist position for some men away from unhealed pain. However, in the Hindu pantheon, Shiva is supposed to be the destroyer. He's supposed to destroy things so to make way for new creations. So the other gods get worried because things that need to be getting destroyed are starting to clog up the whole system, and they're stopping new beings and new creativity coming into form. So collectively, they create this very beautiful goddess in the form of Parvati. And Parvati sits with Shiva, and through a whole series of, basically she uses yogic austerity because Shiva resists coming into embodiment. He resists coming back and relating to the world. But eventually she achieves it by many, many years in godlike time, if you like, of yogic austerity. So she prepares herself to be able to meet him as the equal. And when they finally get together, they embody all the fruits of a pure tantric relationship and what we know as, the soul-to-soul connection. And as I said earlier, we all long for this, however unconscious that longing might be. Now, I want to invite you, as I've done with many of you, to draw from the work of Sally Kempton, who wrote the exceptional book, Awakening Shakti. Because Sally is a former monk to the same master, Muktananda. And in her book, it's not just a brilliant read about the yogic psychology of these different Shakti goddesses. She provides mantras, practices, visualizations, meditations. So if you're serious about wanting to prepare for the sacred marriage, work with using these practices with Kali, with Lalita, and particularly with Parvati. And in many ways, Juno is a Western form of Parvati. She is the goddess of the sacred marriage, and so she is pivotal to this unification, potential unification of masculine and feminine. And there's so much richness to be offered out of this year. Now, so what are the fruits of working in this direction for ourselves? On an inner level, it's about clearing shadows off our hearts so we can really open. And this is where the goddess Psyche is a brilliant ally. when you're having a psyche transit, or a transit to your psyche, there are these opportunities to open to more and more refined and purified and more exquisite experiences of love. You know, it's where the ideal of loving unconditionality becomes more and more of a reality. Obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, but when the masculine and feminine come together within us, there is this exquisite experience of unity. We are complete in ourselves. And from that completion, when we form a relationship with other, we do not need the other to complete us. This is one of the beauties of the Shiva-Parvati relationship. They are both yogis. They are committed. And because of the unification that they create within themselves, they are free to have an extraordinary relationship. And so, also along the way, we get to heal any sexual trauma. We get to heal a lot of woundedness to both masculine and feminine. We get to heal a lot of our shame and our unworthiness. All of which are part of the way to being able to really let someone else see us. To really allow a different level of intimacy. Because when we're talking about soul-to-soul relationships, and you have to excuse the terminology, but what I mean by that is where we can bond with another human being on every level, spiritually, psychically, emotionally, sexually, physically. It's like the whole deal. This is the longing. And this is where we start to resonate with soulmates, where we resonate with that whole notion of the twin flame. And which are other ways of expressing the fact that we're all born with this deep loving for unification, both within but also with another. Now as you open to this, and I've been incredibly lucky in my own life. I've been fortunate enough to have 3 relationships that were very, very much kind of soul-to-soul connections, where that connection was conscious and lived. And in terms of, as I said, opening to an extraordinary unconditionality in our loving, and a bond that is so great that even if the other person is on the other side of the planet, we know what they're feeling, or we're having the experience that they can be completely away of being made love to while we're walking in a supermarket. And this kind of resonates with one of the most beautiful of the Hindu goddesses around this journey is Lalita. Lalita Sundari Tripura. Beautiful goddess of the 3 worlds. And she is a goddess that represents the fact that love is inherent in every bond, in everything in the world, which includes the love is the bond that brings subatomical particles together, that hangs our cells together. And so it's inherent in all of life. Because when we're talking about Tantra, we're not talking as in the popularized form, which is about the relationship with another human being. It's about our relationship to life in all its forms. This is where Andrew Harvey talks about a tantric relationship with the trees, with animals, with children, with the earth. When you have that kind of opening, you bond on all those levels. And so your relationship to everything in life is extraordinary. But if we bring this bond into the personal, it is naturally tantric. And we open to the degree, and kind of tantric awakenings happen regularly when you have this kind of meeting, when you have two people who are available and who can meet on this level. And what this translates to is being able to have the full experience of being totally alive to ourselves and totally alive to the other. Where love-making becomes incredibly, sensually, beautifully long, independently of physical stamina. The potency, the Shakti and the beauty that is generated by the bond just extends that whole world in us, that whole experience in us. And then we start to have the experience that in a man's body that we are a god who is serving the goddess. We experience the partner as the goddess, and vice versa. And this is unbelievably beautiful experience. In India, when you have a Hindu wedding, the goddess wears brilliant red sari. Sorry, the bride wears this brilliant red sari, and she's made up exquisitely, including henna'd hands, and she is an embodiment of the goddess. And the man is similarly prepared to be an embodiment of Shiva. So it's inherent in Hindu wedding, the Shiva-Shakti relationship. But when you get down to this level of opening, then you start to experience that as a reality. So what it does in terms of opening you to all these different levels of experience is kind of hard to put into words. Now I'll give you a quote from Sally which kind of really encapsulates the fact that this is both an inner and an outer journey. In her book, Awakening Shakti, she says, "If we are willing to make the necessary sacrifices, we can have enlightenment and intimacy together. We can know our own transcendent bliss self, and we can realize that bliss in passionate relationship."